nitrogen that's exported. In fact, there's evidence that, and Tom and I had talked about briefly about this, is adding extra nitrogen to a system. Non-organic nitrogen, in fact, inhibits the ability of those nitrifying bacteria and other microorganisms to work effectively. So what else? There was Jeff Moyer was there, talked about the research at Rodale. They have some pretty good scientists out there at Rodale. Maybe we could avail ourselves to some of them, but he talked also about the regenerative organic certification, what that means, and went over that for folks because a lot of these farmers out there were actually new to organic farming. They had just converted, and they were converting because I think Jeff gave the number that conventional soybeans are like $13 and organic soybeans right now are 34. So there's a price incentive for people to get into this. And there were a lot of new farmers to organic, but he was explaining what regenerative organic certification means and maybe talked about market access for them. So that was a good session also. A couple of other things that were interesting and that we could put into the conversation here is a number of speakers talked about shade avoidance response in corn. When corn gets planted into say a roll down cover crop and you've got green on both sides of that corn plant or beans, that there's a light spectrum there that is actually inhibiting shade avoidance response was something that a number of people mentioned, and it's worth thinking about as we try and manage roll down. And that may be not just shade; it may be there are root zone issues there too that we don't quite know about. A couple more things. Tim LaSalle talked about multi-species mixes. He's doing some great research down south. He talked about what he's doing down in Southern California, where he has a 3-year study to do multi-species mixes funded by the Metropolitan Water District because they see the relationship between carbon drawdown in a multi-species mix. The carbon issues that they have with too much carbon in the atmosphere and global warming and their watershed. And so they're actually allowing him to use scarce water, to do some of these multi-species mixes. You know, that I could there was there were people building tools, double rollers, cutters, undercutters. They talked about some seed chaff, or the chaff, what is it called? Chaff sterilizer. So they at the back of a harvester, they make sure all the seeds going out of the back of that harvester are neutered by ultraviolet light. They had some robots they were talking about with highlight spectrums. So at 4 seconds of this highlight UV light over passing over a field in a robot will also terminate weed seedlings. So that was some of the stuff I saw. It was a great conference, a lot to learn, a lot I don't know. So that's my report.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
I think he covered everything. Go on to the next section. No, actually, Paul covered it way more in depth than I. I'm more generally looking at how in the themes of the gathering, and I have to say, to me, maybe the best part of the whole gathering was the format, in that people got the ability to develop thoughts. As you kind of heard, I'm sort of a big fan on that. And so, yeah, there are sometimes on some discussions, there was 1 or 2 questions, and sometimes there'd be 5 or 6, and we weren't operating under a clock, and it gave a relaxed atmosphere, and I think it promotes more thought development and more, you're not quite as hesitant to speak up because you're not in a tight time frame. So I felt there was a couple underlying themes, not intentionally, but that went through everyone there, and one of them was weed control in organic no-till. What a surprise. You know, they have the same problems that we have, even though they do have the heavy corn soybean approach. It's on almost everything it's oriented. The equipment's oriented toward weed control. Almost every meeting, it's how do we handle weeds? And I would say so far, organic no-till, they have just about as many questions as we have, but they've been at it longer. And Paul hit on a lot of good points, but one specifically was that they do tend to think in increments and not as a system. And I think we also tend to have a little more water issues, climate change coming at us. And I think some of what they're doing is driven, I think primarily was from erosion, and then from getting weed control tied with the GMO no-till, and then trying to get away from the GMO and phasing into just organic no-till. And they're still at it. I've had the question, as with the problems that I've had on carbon nitrogen ratios, the CN ratios, the carbon or the nitrogen getting tied up, breaking down carbon. And I quizzed a few farmers sitting at various tables at lunch or dinner or the breakout groups. And kind of surprising, it was almost, and Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, it really was almost never mentioned as an issue of carbon tying up the nitrogen and getting a yield drag. And as I was sitting with one group, and they pointed out a section in a field that was very yellow, and they were talking about, well, we had more carbon, we put more biomass in the ground. It's sort of exactly some of what I've seen. And so I mentioned to these farmers, and they were kind of surprised in that they looked at me and they went, maybe we're having that happen too, but we didn't know what was happening. Yeah. So it seems to be a lot less of an issue in all that they're doing than of the gassing off of, even like is crimping, rolling, impacting just from that plant when it gets hurt and rolled. Is there any exudates that are coming out that are negative then when you're planting a crop? And my concern of having that time between cover crop disturbance and planting. The same thing on talking to farmers at the tables, they're going, yeah, no, we don't give it much thought, but maybe we should. Maybe that we are getting problems that we're not recognizing or we're not aware of, or we're blaming it on weather, or we're blaming it on seed, or we're blaming it on insects, when maybe it is just this carbon nitrogen ratio. So that was my main hope of getting something clarified. And I didn't really get it clarified. So I'm still stuck with my old method of having time in between. So yeah, yield drag and growth restrictions wasn't emphasized that heavily. Interseeding, I didn't get a feeling that I felt they're kind of doing it just to do it, to keep tinkering. I didn't get a feeling overall that, yes, this is a good thing. We're still going to mess with it with the corn and the sunflower. If I can convince Brian, if I think he's tuned into this one today, I do like the idea that there are different growers messing with 60-inch corn. In other words, one row on a 60-inch bed, or for them, it's just they don't have beds, everything's flat, it seems like. And this kind of is one for cultivating, but it's also the pictures that were shown, and I talked to a grower that was doing it. The corn plant gets really big, but it doesn't fill, the corn stalks aren't touching from one to another. And this offers a good opportunity maybe for us, as we're furrow irrigating, to be planting the exposed area in the furrow up onto the bed of a multi-species, to give us a chance to get more cover crop types, species into our mix, as I know we can do better than what we're doing. And that also goes with Tim LaSalle. made a really powerful PowerPoint presentation on the positive impacts of multi-species planting, both on soil organic carbon and period overall on yield and performance. So that was kind of a slap in the face to me, that maybe we can do more. But again, this is a water issue. Like, we'd like to do some of this stuff in the summer, but are we going to have water? Are we going to have water to farm, period? But that's getting away from the meetings. On equipment, yeah, this weed zapper, if we're looking into buying one, they're pretty pricey. So if you're thinking of it, Phil or Paul, other growers that are in the group, they're around 70 grand. They pull a hell of a lot of horsepower. And that's why it costs so much, is the generator. I thought it was going to cost about 15 grand until I looked into it. But it's really smart, really effective. And also, it actually works systemically. The electric bolt goes all the way down. And so for Johnson grass, they claim that it fries the rhizome. So this could be very valuable to park farming. Also, they talked about robotics and carbon robotics, the laser, and that's out now, but there's none available for 2022. They also referenced a couple times, which I haven't had a chance to look up, of a mow row. If there's anyone in the group that knows what a mow row is, I'd be interested. It sounds like it's some way that they're just mowing maybe to the sides of the planted row. I'm not sure exactly what that was. Livestock was prevalent in many discussions, and sometimes the farms are geared more toward the cover crops and what they're doing for the livestock than for the cash crop, which is just, that's the way things can be in the Midwest. Yeah, the undercutting knives, the green plants, bothering corn. They also mentioned one farmer in particular was enthusiastic about Balansa, that's BALANSA clover, that they thought it worked really well with corn. I've never even heard of Balansa clover, and I'm not sure if that's a crop that's grows specifically well in the Midwest or not, but a lot of emphasis on clover and a lot of emphasis on vetch, and rye was a constant at all times. Yeah, Jeff Moyer did make a point that the regenerative is going to keep coming, that consumers are more and more aligning their purchases with their values, and their values are saving the earth. So I don't think we are heading in the wrong direction as far as us doing stuff that's marketable. Also, Jeff Moyer commented to me after my talk that it kind of made me feel good, and that I'm not just a lost babe in the woods, which I might be anyway, but that what I said is I did present a whole farm system approach to nutrient cycling, and he agreed basically with my approach. And he said, what you said is exactly right, that's the direction to go. So it's not trying to give myself a pat on the back, but it is letting you guys know that what we're doing is not off track. Okay, we're getting close. Our intentions are good. Our methodology is okay. It's just the learning curve's a constant, and it's not coming to an end. So with that, we have 3 minutes to answer all your questions.
Well, Scott, the weed zapper that you're thinking of getting, is it that expensive because it's a wide configuration, or are there components that can make it less expensive?
The generator, it produces if anybody knows, like 500,000 watts or volts. I mean, it's amazing how much it is. So the wider your boom is, the bigger the generator has to be. So the one I'm pricing out, it's just 15 foot for us. But it's around 70,000. Yeah, it can get up to needing up to a 275 horsepower tractor to run the generator. Okay, it's a huge load. So that's where the value is. And then it's just a boom with the electrical current running through some exposed wire, and it's on coulters to control your depth. And the coulters are also serving to bring the electrical power back into the ground. So that's about as much as I understand of it, but it did seem a really effective. And it's in my world, like Johnson grass, we're battling in tomatoes and some of the fields that we can't rice. If we can rice, we zap Johnson grass is not a problem, but those the ones that are just, that promote Johnson grass, like corn, it grows in. Anyway, if we can go over the top of those tomato plants, and even if we don't get a systemic effect, man, it's worth so much to stop the Johnson grass from sucking up all the nutrients and impacting the tomato yield.
Aaron Silva had said, that farmers have to go at this with she said, call it 100 little hammers. She said, farmers getting excited about the weed zapper, but in reality, the weeds will adapt. You'll see adaptation over time too, if that becomes widely used. So it's interesting perspectives, but I'm not sure Cal OSHA has actually seen that working in California fields. That's going to be an interesting one to run that much juice out on a bar in front of your tractor. And when you get off to just check something in the track, you better shut the generator off, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think that's been the holdback on the development of it. And I actually tried to rent or lease one to see how it worked and if it fitted before I fork out 70 grand. And just for what you're saying, Paul, they are not interested in the liability issues. So I'm actually going to run up to Tule Lake sometime here in the next couple of weeks and watch one run. And so I'll let the CIG group know. That's if I survive looking at it. Okay. If I'm not back, talk to Brian.
Wear your rubber boots.
What was the discussion on undercutters, or what was the basis of that?
There
I
was
kind of felt it was a last resort more than a first resort. I think it was just another method of them trying to, I think it might have been driven, correct me, Paul, again. I think some of it was driven that the roller crimping didn't quite get the kill. So then they just came in and undercut it to finish it off.
Yeah.
You agree, Paul?
Yeah, some like alfalfa has you have a hard time terminating that with just rolling and or mowing. They had some good examples of that where
I'm sure it's because of
where the alfalfa actually grew back faster, and then again you had this impact of the seedlings getting lost down in more foliage that's around it and not thriving.
Yeah.
So,
the other option we could run it down around the room that way, and then come down here and put it here. Then it should reach their house, but yeah, I don't know. It might need to do it. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, the problem is the roof. I think we would need to bring it down here.
Adam, you
Yeah.
Anybody
So-
else for Scott
Meeting is
and
picking up
Paul?
and go.
All right. All right, well, maybe I'll tell you what, I take the point, and this is a jammed agenda. We knew that at the outset, but let's switch over there. Paul and Scott, thank you guys very much there. Paul, you want to continue with Tom then? Switch gears a little bit, okay?
you want to do the background, or you want me to do? I had a discussion yesterday with Renata from CalCan and Andy from EFA, and I could just give a quick report on that.
well, let me give the background first a little bit.
Okay.
So we had we're all planned up for a pre-conference at EcoFarm. As we know, EcoFarm was canceled as an in-person event. And so kind of us discussed what did we want to do about that, because there is a virtual EcoFarm. I think Each of our farmers has offered to hold a field day growing season. And we decided that that would be better, more informational, more educational in lieu of a virtual pre-conference that would day anybody, because nobody's going to stay on a computer for an entire day. So that's pretty much where we're at. I will let Paul we're going to continue any kind of affiliation with EcoFarm in doing that, or just rely on our associations with the University of California, Chico State University, and any other groups as far as sponsoring and promoting the field days. So go ahead, Paul.
Well, you know, it sometimes goes through my brain about, you know, how many birds can you knock off the wire with one stone, and CalCan has a mandate, CDFA, a grant, $5,000 grant to do some on-farm days to talk about no-till and regenerative agriculture. CalCan does work in climate action stuff. EcoFarm was planning to do some farm days that were got people to out to the farms as an extension of going to EcoFarm this year. There would be some farm field days that they would offer. And I don't know, Jeff, you can correct us. As part of our grant, were we supposed to have some sort of extension function where people actually got to either go to a farm or see what we're doing, or maybe that's just that something has to be written up. But were demonstrations part of the grant, Jeff?
Yes, but I think we covered that in other means there throughout the course of this. But it's still a good option there, yeah, for discussion at least, yeah.
Well, so that evolved to what Tom talked about, that we maybe have 3 farm field days, one at Phil's in sometime in April. Maybe Scott said sometime in July might be at best at his place, and we could maybe do something in the fall if we have anything that's growing in the fall here. And so and EFA could provide a function of where they just organize registration if people want that, and CalCan could help out and provide some of the funding to make it happen. It could be pretty simple. You know, we might need to rent some chairs and places where people can sit and watch, see a screen inside someplace at Phil's or Scott's. But lunch could be a taco wagon. There could be a prepaid fee where it costs $15 or $20. But it's really up to this group as to whether that's something we want to do. And certainly we could just do a field day at Scott and down at Phil's and not worry so much about connecting with EFA or making this more than it needs to be. So it's what does the group think?
Let's have the other farmers weigh in as to their opinions. Jeff, do we have sufficient funding in our CIG grant to handle these 3 on-farm events from what you see? Pardon me?
It doesn't sound like it's too costly. Yes, so for sure, yes.
Yeah, I don't think so. So having to fish for other people's money and then do specific things that may or may not work all that well for us, I don't think we're not really under that kind of pressure. I don't think, are we? Economically, yeah, okay. So Phil or Scott,
Well, since if we're maybe April or May would be doable, it'd probably be late April or first half of May, we could do something. So in concept, a field day would be, a portion of it would be what we would have presented at EcoFarm, maybe just not as much, because you would be able to go out in the field and see a lot more equipment field instead of having to show it. So maybe in our case, it would be some showing of some of the trial work we did in the previous years. That might be in the ballpark of 45 minutes to an hour. That would be set up in a place where we have tables, for people to sit, screen like Paul was talking about. I think Jeff could set that up. And then it would be moving out to the field, or at least maybe equipment set up to look at, and then see some application in the field. And a field day would be 3 hours,
Closing the
4
windows.
hours, 6 hours, or any, what?
I think it could be anywhere 3 to 6 hours. It could be 6 hours, or 3 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon with lunch in there.
And it wouldn't be like at the pre-conference, people were charged for it, but in our case, there wouldn't really be a charge for people to come.
I don't
I
think
think
we'd have a need to charge people.
Yeah.
That's right.
I'm considering it during the production season. It's really hard to attract farmers and to pull them off their farms. When we go to field days that UC puts on in the middle of the growing season, you often have a lot of NGO people and agency people there, and a real smattering of farmers. I think that by having these three in 3 different regions, we might be able to pull farmers better, because in each region, they wouldn't have to travel as far to attend one of these. But on the other hand, if people, like, say, paid even $20 for something, they're more likely to come if they already made an investment in it than if it's free and I get up and just look out the window and see if I feel like going today or not. So I don't know. That's something that we could discuss as to whether charge. I don't think it's because necessarily we need the money, but it makes people buy in, and then we have a fair idea of how many people are going to show up that way too. I think I've
Me?
asked each of you.
No, this
Hey,
may go to
somebody
4:30.
needs to ask Radomir to
Rad,
to-
yeah, maybe turn off your audio, Rad, okay? Because it's, there you go. Thanks. Go ahead, Tom.
So I think I've asked each of the farmers whether they could handle up to 100 people. And so if that is, everybody still thinks they can, we could cap it at that. Another issue that I see is moving people around on a farm. Full Belly actually has a people mover that we can move people around, but if people have to walk long distances to go see what they're going to see, that eats up a lot of time, particularly at maybe at Scott's farm, because it's very large. And then Phil's farm, obviously we're going to do it on one of your farms or the other, and we're not going to go to both, but that's something that we need to deal with. Otherwise, I think, I think as far as content should goes, if the part that is going to be held in indoors or a semi-indoors, I think we might want to consider including Dwayne Beck's presentation that he was going to do for us, which was going to be remote anyhow. And we might consider going ahead and incorporating that, and then having data presentation and results. And then Cindy Daly was going to do her presentation on nutrient density. And so I think we want to definitely weave a lot of that stuff into, maybe not all 3 of them, but Dwayne's, if it's pre-recorded, we could use that as a kickoff for all 3 of the field days. The main thing is that we all buy into this idea. I think it's pretty important, if Phil's going to be the first one, either late April or before mid-May, that we go ahead and we pick a date for that and start promoting it. It would be great if we had the actual dates for all 3 of them, but if we say that Scott is July and Full Belly is November, and the exact dates to be determined after a while, I think we could probably do that. But the first one, I think we ought to start hatching the plan and promoting it. So that's what I feel.
Just in terms of a date, there was a date kind of set aside for something that was connected with EFA, and that was the 23rd of April. So I would suggest that as a potential date. I would say maybe there's a few things we might want to say is what we would control the content of how the day goes and what the presentation is. I see some benefit. There's a loud bullhorn if you want to get 100 people to an event, having EFA publicize it and CalCan publicize it and it go through our network, I think you're more likely to get 100 people there, and maybe some extension folks could let folks know that what's going. I think it's 100 is a max there, and maybe that's even too many. I think we could ask maybe it wants to be 50, and that you do charge $20 or so, and that helps make sure you got people who are sincere about coming. And if we could do those things, I think we could probably pull it off without too much expense. And you know, EFA would do the registration, organizing that piece of it if we wanted them to. They
Yeah,
have a little bit of money to do
But they
that.
also said we got to pay them to do that.
They said they have money in a grant that's still available, Healthy Soils grant, $4,000. So I think maybe this $20, what's not used for lunch, goes to them. That's okay.
So, Brian, I want your opinion too. I'm listening and I'm trying to think of how we would be able to do this on our farm. One, well, yeah, because we are so spread out, but two, I'm not sure what we have to show. I mean, honestly, we've got, as far as we've got, you know, a mix of trials going this and that, but what's going to be apparent at that time of the year? Yeah, I know the CIG trial, we could spend probably 2 hours there at that little 8-acre block. I'm wondering, you know, Jeff, you've seen, you know, the farm, you think there's 3 to 6 hours of stuff that Brian and I can cover? And Brian, what do you think? I mean, what you know, what are you gonna have to show on some of it, having some of Cindy's data, or if we had data, if there's anything yet showing on the CIG trial? But I'm wondering just how well we can have 3 hours worth of stuff that's worth people's time. Brian, what do you think? Is Brian on? Jeff?
Yes, he should be. Yeah, I'm looking there.
Yeah,
Brian,
he's on.
there-
He's on.
There he is. What do you think, Brian? Not sure, Scott.
Okay, he's not responding. But Scott, you know, you guys don't have to run the whole show, because you mentioned Cindy, Dwayne could be also part of it, and you know, we can bring in other features other than just what you guys are going to say yourself. And I think many people would appreciate getting an overview on the ground of your entire system as well, because you've got a very highly evolved system. And you know, just like the people in Omaha appreciated it, anybody that comes to your farm will appreciate what you're doing up there. So.
Okay, I just think probably toward the 3 hour side would be more realistic than the 6. 3 hours and lunch, like a 9 to 12, you know, and in July, we definitely don't want to be doing anything in the afternoon in the Sacramento Valley, because, you know, it could be 105.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so at this point, we'll say July for Scott, and then Paul, you guys would be October, November, something like that.
Yeah, we can talk about that as we go forward. I don't know when would be the best time there. There's a few things going on in those months, and boy, I'm not sure where we're going to be in terms of the ability to put cover crops in the ground, or where our water is going to be come August, September. So we could tentatively say, I think we're going to have some kind of gathering that's going to be like, and it's not going to be a hose down. It's going to be some kind of early October gathering. Maybe we can try and coordinate it as a day before or a day after, something like that in association with that one. So early October, perhaps, is what I'd say.
Okay. Well, maybe we ought to just go out front and schedule and promote and work on Phil's day agenda for late April, May, and then keep Scott and yours in the can and see how things develop. And we've got time for those. So we take them one at a time, I guess, maybe. Good way to go.
Yeah, I'm all for Phil being the guinea pig. Let's run him through the ringer, find out all the problems that are involved in pulling it off. And then you can shape it up real nice for Brian and I.
Yeah, but we don't want Phil to be out there all by himself either. So you guys have made a commitment, and if we can, schedule and organize days at your places, you'll go ahead and do them, right?
Yes.
Great.
Okay.
Phil, somebody mentioned the 23rd of April. Was that okay with you, or do you want to still think about it?
The
That
23rd of April is a Saturday.
Saturday, yeah.
Yeah, we run our, it's a little bit complicated for us on that date because we run our
Oh.
farm stand on that Saturday. So
Let's let Phil come up with a date here in the
Yeah, let
next week
let
or
me
10
look at some-
days. And
You guys, you should do it in the middle of the week.
well, ideally for me, a Tuesday or Thursday has less impact on what's going on the farm because we're probably going to have to take one of our buildings possibly to where you could set up a screen and have a little area where people to sit, or we could do it over at the house too. I mean, I know the problem we ran into at Full Belly was to get an area where you can set a screen up and not have a lot of light. So it needs to be in an area where something like that will work.
you got to darken it. Yeah.
So we can clean up one of our shop buildings and do something there. A couple of things that come to mind, instead of making it a lunch that kind of complicates things and takes time to coordinate, something like an 8 to a 12. And if it spilled over a little bit, I don't think people care if it takes them a little bit, if it went to 12 or 12:30, but maybe not trying to coordinate a lunch is as a suggestion, and just have it the field day. If you either 4 hours in the morning or 4 hours in the afternoon. And then 100 people is a little bit cumbersome. 50 is probably a nicer number, but I think we may be able to handle up to 100. I'll just have to visualize where we'd set something up. We'd probably do it in San Juan. We've herded people around, some relatively good sized groups. They don't always stay together, but it's not that far to walk to different areas on San Juan as opposed to Santa Ana. So that's just a couple thoughts.
Sure. We got to do what is comfortable for each farm and each farmer and works for their schedules. So we'll let you come up with a date here in the next week or 10 days, Phil, and then we'll go with that. Yeah. And right. I know your farmer's market area, if you stacked up a lot of bins around it, we could darken that up pretty well, if that could be accessible for the presentations. And then the outdoor stuff is easy, so. Well, let's go with that, and then say July for Scott and fall for Full Belly, and then we'll take them one at a time. It's less to digest than trying to put them all together at once. And Paul, as far as what relationship we want to have with EFA, I think EFA and CalCan, they're gonna promote it or use their networks to advertise it without regard. But I don't know what I guess we can talk about that because whether we want to. So are you okay with charging $20 at your place if we decide we want to do that, Phil, or do you want it to be just flat free?
I would lean toward no cost, but yeah, that's not a big deal to me one way or other. It just seems it's like a field day that we're doing. To not charge would be especially if there's not lunch or anything like that involved.
Yeah, it makes it a lot less complicated.
I agree.
Okay. Yeah, I'm all for no charge, but what we got to figure out is how the heck do we get farmers there? You know, and we got to use some tricks to get farmers there, but I don't know. We'll just do our best, I guess.
Well, I
You
think
use lunch. That's how you get farmers.
What's
yeah,
that, Carrie?
You use lunch. Most of these, there was just a big regenerative field day at the Burroughs facility a couple weeks ago. They had over 350 people there. It was the single
Oh.
biggest farm event I'd ever been to.
Wow.
It was pretty amazing. I couldn't believe it. The program wasn't all that great, but they sure got a lot of people.
What percentage were farmers?
Actually, a fair amount. Actually, yeah, it was a pretty, but it was in Central California. It was in Merced, so you know there was a lot of the people neck of the woods came, but there was people from Bakersfield there. People from Northern California came down. I was impressed. It was the single biggest I'd ever been to for a school day field day since I've been attending those. And they provided lunch at no cost. They were hamburgers, and somebody picked up the cost. I don't know who it was. Somebody did. I don't know who subsidized the lunch for everybody.
So everybody loves a free lunch, huh?
Everybody loved the free lunch. And I've been in the business of getting farmers to field days, and it's really hard to get them there without a lunch.
I know.
They'll
Well,
come
Jeff-
one time and never come again.
Jeff, you've put on a lot of field days, and what do you think? How do you get farmers to them in the middle of the season?
No, we're gonna have to, everyone's good ideas here, and if everyone start thinking about this, and I don't have any straightforward answer, Tom, there on that, but I think, you know, Carrie's right there that maybe that's that combination, that lunch might be a decent draw there, Phil. I don't know, but you gotta call what you are comfortable with and what you can handle there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
you know, I've been to events where they have just a taco truck that you can consign with, and they'll provide a lot of the food, and people can either buy it if they want, or we could see if there's grant money to go ahead and pay for some lunches, you know, a kind of minimum lunch. But I think it can be done pretty effortlessly if you just assign it to somebody, and we're not worried about that so much.
And that works good too.
Also, I think we kind of want to attract more than farmers. I think it's important that PCAs and CCAs are hearing of a different way of problem solving,
Yeah.
and including CEU values, you know, because everyone's trying to get their 20 or 40 hours wherever they're at on keeping their license. And I really think it's important because, especially on so many large farms, these guys are making some pretty important decisions. You know, Carrie's making important decisions and leading farmers in how to think, and we got to tap them as much as we have to tap the farmer.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Scott. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yep.
Because every PCA you get there is touching 10 or 20 or 30 farmers. So yeah, it's excellent.
A lot of that too could be accomplished in the catchy name of the thing too. That's intriguing. You know, really describing what you're going to go over can really make a big difference in getting people there. But from our experience.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, Tom and Paul, thank you very much for guiding this discussion. I think a lot of progress has been made here. Lots of details still to be sorted out, but are you comfortable with the what we've come up with today?
Yeah, Tom and I'll follow up with the discussion here, and we'll get back to the group kind of as to, and Phil, you can come up with some dates maybe, and we'll begin to think about how we round this out.
All right.
Yeah. I think
Very
we're going forward with Phil's day, and then the other two in the wings, and we'll build the airplane as we fly it.
Right. All right. Thanks everyone very much. Now I want to transition to our last topic here, the last third of our agenda here. It is a real honor this afternoon, and this was something that came together very quickly, And I thank a good friend and colleague, Sjoerd Duiker, who's working with Bob Beelman, and I'll introduce them in a minute here, but for graciously accommodating the scheduling. Everyone's going to get very busy pretty soon, including them back there in Pennsylvania. But I want to introduce Dr. Sjoerd Duiker, who is in the Department of Plant Sciences at Penn State University, along with his esteemed colleague, Bob Beelman, who have done some very, very interesting work that I hope and trust that many of us have read already, the 2 or 3 papers that they forwarded to us, and it has gotten out and highly visible around the world recently. And so with that very brief introduction, Sjoerd and Bob, we are very grateful for your time. It's 7 o'clock back there in Pennsylvania, we realize, but we'd be really keen to hear a little bit about your work and then have some questions as well there. So thank you both very much for joining us this afternoon.
Hi, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be with you guys. Sorry we can't be there in person, but nonetheless, because we also like to have some warmer weather here. It's been a little chilly lately. Yeah, so we are grateful that you guys are interested in our work. So Bob is a retired professor in food science. He's actually a mushroom specialist, and he contacted me. We are members of the same church, so we know each other because of that. And he talked to me one day about this thing called Ergo, and he will explain more about it. But we believe it's an interesting link between soil health and food health. So, you know, that's still a little bit of sometimes difficult to prove. We believe in our gut, we feel that soil health should result in better food health, but it's often very difficult to prove. But we think we're onto something, and Bob will explain to you more about that. So I'm by the way, soil management specialist, and I've been working over the years with Jeff, especially through the World Congress of Conservation Agriculture. So we're good friends. Let me pull up Bob's presentation here. First, I have to share my screen. No, Jeff, can I do that?
I think so. I made you the co-host, so you should try it there. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Let me see here. No, this needs to come up. Presentation mode. Do you see that, Jeff?
Yes, very good.
Okay, well, Bob, you go ahead.
Okay, well, it's an honor really to have you folks show some interest in our work, and I'm really happy to be here because I don't have to watch Jeopardy right now and feel like I can't get any answers. You know, sometimes I have them in my mind, but I can't get them out. Anyway, this is the question that we've been dealing with for some time. Is ergothioneine a longevity vitamin limited in the American diet? And this is taken place over probably at least the last 12 years. I've been retired 12 years, and but I still have an office on campus, and I used to have a lab up until a couple of years ago. So I have to rely on collaborations now, and that's luckily I've been able to find some good ones. Sjoerd being, of course, one of the main ones. How do I advance these?
You want to go in? Okay.
Just hit that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is this ergothioneine? First of all, we call it ergo because we can cut the presentation in half that way. So it's a unique antioxidant, okay, and it's known to scavenge strong oxidants, and it has anti-inflammatory properties. So between oxidative stress and inflammation, almost every chronic disease known to man is covered there. So it was discovered in ergot fungus in 1909, but not much happened until in the 50s when a few people found that it was in fairly high concentrations in human and animal blood, and they traced it to the food they were eating. But in 2005, this German scientist, Dirk Grundemann, discovered that all mammals make a highly specific genetically coded transport protein for this. And so that within an hour of consuming a food with ergothioneine, it's in your red blood cells already. And we've proven that actually with some work we did here. It's known to be produced primarily by fungi and some cyanobacteria, that's blue-green algae, and mycobacteria. At least two of those are generally soil-borne. So if it's in fungi, the question I had was, is it concentrated in mushrooms? Because that was what was the focus of my research for many years. Shift?
Yep. And what?
Oh, this one. Okay, so you saw the structure of it. It's really a histidine derivative, but the reason why ergothioneine is so stable, which is one of its, it doesn't auto-oxidize in the body and everything, is that it is at its physiological pH is found in this thione form over on the left. And the thiol form is much more easily oxidized. So because it's at physiological pH, it's found in the stable form, it really helps out. So we answered the question, is it concentrated in mushrooms? I had a graduate student, Joy Dubois, at the time, and she showed that mushrooms had very high levels. Even the levels in the button mushrooms down in the left-hand corner, which are quite low compared to some of the other ones, that's still 20 times higher than any food source that we knew at the time. So it is concentrated in mushrooms because a mushroom is just a big ball of fungus, basically. So we determined that it was bioavailable by this study where I mentioned it gets into your blood within a few minutes. You know what? This is the wrong presentation.
Not the right one.
So I'm going to have to skip some of these. I thought that I got rid of some of these, and I'm going to abbreviate the things. So this gentleman is Bruce Ames. Some of you may know he was a professor and head of the biochem department at Berkeley for years, and he's 90 something now, but he's still active, still has a lab, and he came up with this triage theory. The quote that we have there is that the body really wants it. And triage theory means that it, since there are multiple functions for a lot of these micronutrients like this, priority is given, if it's in short supply, to reproduction and survival. And then all the other functions that are involved in long-term health and everything get short-shrifted. So that's why it's important that we have adequate amounts in the diet. He actually published this paper in the Proceeding of the National Academy of Sciences to show that ergothioneine was a longevity vitamin. So this gentleman is Barry Hallowell, who's a professor at the National University of Singapore. He is, without doubt, one of the world's leading authorities on free radicals, antioxidants, and how they affect aging. And his lab has been working full-time almost on ergothioneine and shown that it has a lot of positive effects. And one of them was, he showed that as people age, the ergothioneine level in their blood decreases with age. And we also, of course, have cognitive impairment arriving as we age. But what he showed was that people that had no cognitive impairment, but were the same age, had higher ergothioneine levels, indicating that there might be a relationship there. He also showed that people that have Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease have about half the level of ergothioneine in their blood compared to age-matched healthy people. So this has gotten a lot of attention, especially in the area of cognition. Okay, I'm going to skip through these. So a few years ago, I was involved in a human clinical trial at Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York City. And it was to look at how mushroom consumption could help people with diabetic risk factors. And so people were fed a serving of mushrooms every day. First, their blood was taken, then they were served 100 grams of mushrooms a day for 16 weeks. Then blood was taken, and then they went off the mushrooms, and four weeks later, the blood was taken. And what's interesting is ergothioneine is definitely bioavailable, as you can see over in this. Can I point?
Yeah.
Okay. Over here, this is the ergothioneine level in the plasma before they started the mushrooms. After 16 weeks, it's significantly higher, and then it drops back down after they go off. And so it's definitely getting into the body, and this is the plasma. It also, as they ate the mushrooms, it increased this adiponectin, which is a hormone that's thought to help control blood sugar and that kind of thing. The data here is with two glycotoxins, or glycation end products, they call them. So these are bad guys. They cause inflammation. In fact, they're very similar to that dreaded hemoglobin A1C that everybody that has diabetes has to worry about. These are present in fried foods and so on and so forth. So we find here before they started, this is the level of this. These are both just different glycation products. It goes down significantly, and then when they go off, it goes back up. Same here. So it's definitely an antioxidant, but also a very strong anti-inflammatory, because these are highly inflammatory compounds. Okay, so I'm sitting in my office one day after I retired, and I got to thinking, half of the population doesn't eat mushrooms. I remember when I was a kid, my mom used to give me cream of mushroom soup from Campbell's, and I would pick those little specks out and put them on the side of the plate. So I was in that category. I only started eating them when they were starting to pay the bills here. But so these are, again, the ergothioneine level in the button mushroom and one of the specialty mushrooms, the gray oyster. You can look at, these are all foods that already are known to be fairly good sources, but you can see how low they are compared to the mushrooms. And of course, here's the one that you might relate to the most, oats. Tempeh is an interesting thing. It's for soybeans. It's fermented with mold, usually in Asia, overnight, and then they cook it and put it in miso soup and various things. So Asians eat a lot of this, and it's high because of the fungi that's involved in the fermentation. So a publication came out about that time where they estimated the amount of ergothioneine in the diet of 5 countries, 4 European countries and 1 US company. And I took their data and adjusted it so that it shows the amount consumed per day by the average weight person. And as you can see, interestingly enough, US is the lowest, and then Finland, France, Ireland, and Italy. Quite a big difference between US and Italy. So I got to thinking, I wonder if I can find the effects of chronic diseases in these countries and try to correlate the two of these. So indeed, you can find those data. This is Alzheimer's dementia death rate in death rate per 100,000. So I plotted the the level of ergothioneine estimated, and you can see Finland and the US were the lowest in ergo, but the highest in these, and you get a sort of a dropping. I added Japan in red because I estimated Japan myself based on the fact they eat a lot of high ergo mushrooms, and they eat a lot of mold fermented foods. So it kind of fits the curve. This is Parkinson's disease, very similar kind of curve. And of course, these are associations. It doesn't mean there's a cause and effect here, but it gets your attention. In fact, I told somebody, the guy that's editor of the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, about these figures. I said, I'd be afraid to show them to you because you'd laugh at me. He said, I won't laugh, send them to me. And he said, this is how we discovered that high fat diets promote higher cancer rates. Also, you can look up life expectancy. And this is what you get when you plot life expectancy versus estimated ergothioneine consumption. This should say estimated here. Again, there's a relationship there that's pretty interesting. So the fact that we called ergothioneine a longevity vitamin this would support that. Then there's a couple of what the so-called metabolomic studies done. This was one that was done in Sweden with 3,236 people, all consuming a healthy diet. They're all consuming a healthy diet and that didn't have these chronic diseases like diabetes. And out of the 112 metabolites, this is in their blood, the only one that was highly significant correlated with lack of mortality was ergothioneine, and they were not looking for it. They were not looking for it. So it was a big surprise, but this is, a similar study done in Japan with people with frailty and lack of cognition and mobility. And they found out of the number of metabolites they measured that it was important. Ergothioneine decreased frailty with age, and it was neuroprotective. So again, supports our hypothesis here. I'm going to go through these. Now you like that one because that's Sjoerd, outstanding. Right. He's outstanding in his field.
Really great picture there. Oh wow!
But that's the plots that we have.
I want to be known in the moldboard plow field.
Right. So anyway, he can tell you more about. But we have three treatments out there: moldboard plow, which is what's shown here, the chisel disc, and a no-till. And I wanted to get out here and get a picture so I could show people what a plowed field looks like. And I could see one myself, I'm a city slicker. So this was done at the agronomy farm. Again, that's been in these treatments since 1978, right? Sure. Yeah. So we looked at tillage intensity, no-till, we abbreviated NT, chisel disc CD, moldboard plow MP, randomized complete block design, so on and so forth. Incidentally, we're down to 3 reps on this now because the rep number 1 was close to a country road where there was flooding, and it was starting to mess things up. So we only included 3 of the 4 reps. But what we found was ergo was decreased significantly, 25 to 30% as tillage increased. And interestingly enough, the crop yields also decreased as tillage increased, which is a plus, So that was a Journal of Nutritional Science where we published some of this information, and this was a graphical abstract that we had for that. So kind of shows the link that we're trying to promote here. Mushrooms, of course, goes directly to human consumption, although animals eat these too in the wild, and probably has some effects. We got the fungi down around the roots, passing it into the plants. The plants can directly take it to humans, or it can go to the animal, and then the humans eat the animals. So interesting enough, we first put this paper, submitted to the British Journal of Nutrition, and they turned it down. Oops. And they said, but we wanted to set it down to our second class journal, the Journal of Nutritional Science. And I said, okay. And I got an email about 2 days later from the editor saying, we like this so much, we want to put this as a perspective in our next edition. And then in February that year, we got notified that it was designated as the paper of the month for that month of all 6 journals that organization publishes. So that was kind of another sign that, people are, find this of interest. So I've talked a lot. Anyway, these are some of the people that are involved in the collaborations. This is Michael Kolaris, who's an ex-PhD student of mine, who's a stay-at-home dad. And he helps, he's the guy that keeps me going and is the brains of the outfit in many cases. John Ritchie is a professor of medicine, of public health and pharmacology at our medical school, which is in Hershey. And there's a story about him, but we met at a conference in Amsterdam and found out that we had a mutual interest in ergothioneine, and we started working together. Al Phillips is a retired biochemist who's been retired longer than me, but he still has a lab because he teaches undergrads every semester. But he's the guy that told me, Bob, you ought to look in mushrooms for ergo. So I owe him, nothing would have happened if it wouldn't have been for Al. And of course, here's Sjoerd. And of course, some other people involved. But I kind of want to turn it over to questions and let Sjoerd chime in because he's the one that knows about the farm stuff a lot more than me.
Yeah, so Jeff, in a nutshell, I guess we are here. I know you're a group of collaborators there is very interested in soil health, isn't it? So in this work, we kind of have an indication of that there might be a link between soil health through the no-till systems, because in no-till, our soil, that has been quite proven in several studies that in no-till we have more fungi in the soil, and also more mycorrhizae. So we are not quite sure yet how the ergothioneine gets from the fungus into the plant, but Bob is hypothesizing that it is because of mycorrhizal associations with the plant roots. And so we have more of those in no-till than in moldboard plowed fields. And so that we think is the reason that it is higher. Next week, we're going to talk with some specialist in fungi. I know, Bob, or a mycorrhizae
Yeah, there's
specialist.
a soil microbiologist who's at the USDA Eastern Regional Research Lab, which is outside of Philadelphia, and he's a fungal plant interaction specialist, which is right down the alley. In fact, he's already done some experiments that pretty much show that it is mycorrhizal fungi that are passing it on to the plant. One question though is how is it, once it gets to the roots, how does it get to the corn kernel or the, the higher part of the plant? Does the plant have a transporter? We don't know. So.
Yeah, so is it a little bit clear? I mean, we want to open it up to questions if you guys have any questions.
So I have a question as to where these different countries are getting their ergo and their diets. Italy being, I guess, the highest, right? I presume they might eat a lot. They probably do eat a lot of mushrooms. I'm particularly curious about where Ireland gets all the ergo, because I would think that mushrooms would be pretty exotic for the Irish. Where are they picking up all the ergo in their diets?
No, the Irish and the English do eat a lot of mushrooms. In fact,
they do.
Yeah, I've been over and visited a number of the farms, mushroom farms in Ireland, and they're really into them. But I'm not exactly sure how these people made the estimate. But they did mention that mushrooms was a big, a big part of it. But I was never able to figure out exactly how they did it. But I just decided, hey, this is the best we have, and we're going to use it and see what comes of it.
Okay.
And, let the chips fall where they may.
I have a question on the first, very fascinating, and I hope it proves true. Certainly will make farm practices more marketable. But so as far as producing the fungi and getting into a plant, would you say you would be more effective on getting ergo into a plant on greenhouse mushrooms versus farm soil mushrooms? Or any crop, the oats, whatever, if it's grown in a greenhouse or compared to being grown in natural soil, what would be the impact on the ergo availability, take up, volume?
Yeah. Well, this gentleman that's down in Eastern Regional has looked at that, and it's obvious that natural soil works better from, I think, the data that he's shown us. But also he's done experiments where he inoculates the certain fungi into these soils and shows how it increases the uptake of ergo.
So we would like to see this in the context of a more a different type of a food system. Again, here we can go the reductionist route of just ergo. We have done that repeatedly with our food, like saturated fats were bad, then unsaturated, unsaturated fats were bad. Then we needed omega-3 fatty acids and not omega-6 fatty acids. And it goes from one thing to another. Then sugar was the bad one, then this and then that. But each time we look to one component, but we like to make sure that this gets back into the system, that we put it back into the wider context of how we produce food, that soil health has a beneficial effect. So this is just like recently that we did this and discovered this, but we would like to expand it and perhaps look at other things too, like I saw some work on, I'm also doing work with some farmers on grass-fed meat production, where the animals graze in the field, and contrast that with grain-fed feedlot production. And there is some research to show that the meat is also a different quality, that it has certain vitamins and lower contents of saturated fat, and that is it's more healthy. But we could, of course, now go and just focus in on just let's produce more ergo in our food, but we would like to put it in a wider context of a different type of food production. Does that make sense? It bothers me a lot to see each time we go back to a reductionist type of thinking.
You know, one of the ideas that is becoming pretty prominent among the group that you're talking to here and other farmers is that as you build soil by using cover crops, and as you increase diversity, as you get to more than 8 species, and there's been work done on this in a number of places, and even more species than that from different families, you reach what some soil scientists are calling a tipping point, where you get quorum sensing and you get a rapid increase in the fungal life and the number of species that are around the root systems. So I think what you're talking about is very interesting, because it absolutely pertains to what we're trying to do in increasing fungal life in the soil, and then reaping the benefits of having that fungal life. And it's through different practices, I think, and perhaps one of the keys is diversity in cover crops in these kind of low maintenance, low till systems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'd certainly like to look at that, because, you know, the literature is replete with examples of where, you know, cover crops and diversity of the cover does lead to more fungi in the soil. So, but so far, this was the only one that we had the ability to look at. The other thing I think it's interesting is, since ergo is produced only by fungi, not by plants, it allows us to say there is this connection. If you looked at something else that the plant can produce itself, then there's no way to measure it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just shared a paper with everyone, I don't know, a few weeks ago, that comes out of Germany and Wageningen in the Netherlands, where they're demonstrating that the higher diversity of plants in an environment does enhance the diversity of species, and particularly enhance the quantity and diversity of fungi.
Mm-hmm.
So
can you forward that to us?
Yeah, if Jeff can share your emails with us, I would be very
Right.
happy to forward that to you. Yeah, I forget how old. I think it's a 2017 paper. It's been around for a little bit, if I'm recalling correctly. But,
The other thing I should mention on this is we basically have done all of this work since I was retired. So the last 12 years, basically with no funding. As I was talking to John Ritchie about this, who has several NIH grants and everything, he said, Bob, it's all the best work I've ever done since I've been at Penn State and College of Medicine, I did without any funding. I did it on the side. So we call this bootlegging, you know, this is legalized bootlegging. But of course, you know, Sjoerd had funds, USDA funds for the plots he has out there, but
Not really.
no.
No.
Okay.
I just try to keep them going.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, one of the major goals of our reduced and no-till research on these 3 farms, the group that you're talking to, one of our major goals was increasing the fungal aspect of our microbial communities by less disturbance. And
No.
we've done
What
a
kind of
certain
practices
amount.
are you guys using?
Pardon me?
What kind of practices are you using to accomplish that?
I'm a retired farmer, so I'll let the active farmers respond to that.
I
Well,
guess
we're using, at least we're trying to get away from what would be full tillage. And we're not, at least, I don't think we're having much success with no-till in vegetable production, but we have made strides in reduced till, and maybe the area of the surface tilled is maybe transitioned from what would be 8 to 15 inches to maybe 3 to 4 inches, maybe a little bit less sometimes, but in that ballpark. So there is still some level of tillage, but it's not the same type of tillage, at least on our farm.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
speaking to
similar.
that situation, we found that the chisel disc treatments were almost as good as the no-till.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, there was no significant difference. So that shows that I think you can get by with minimal tillage and still see some positive effects.
Did you show the graph with the ergothioneine levels in the different tillage systems?
It was in the other presentation. I
Oh,
forgot to.
So we didn't actually show the one graph. Is it? Okay. Where is it then?
I have to go back to the email one.
Okay.
So you are seeing some correlation with some kind of a reduced tillage, whatever that is, versus a real major disturbance, and that is relatively close to no-till. The minor disturbance is fairly close to no-till then
Yes.
in
Yes.
ergothine levels.
Yes. I realize now that I don't think we actually showed the graph with our the results from our tillage study. Oh yeah, there we go. So,
But this one only shows the 2 treatments. This was a review paper we wrote recently, and we just showed the major effects of no-till and moldboard plow. The chisel disc was
dark, yeah, the dark green here. So we did this. This is an Ames soybean small grain rotation, and after the small grains, we grow a cover crop of hairy veg typically. And so in this was the first time we started to look into this. We didn't actually take a lot of samples, so we just only had 1 sample of each type of tillage.
Composite.
Yeah, composited sample. But in the maize, we saw that there was a higher ergothioneine concentration in the grain from the no-till compared to the moldboard plow. And then that spiked our interest to go on. And next year, we actually took samples from all the plots in the 3 replicates and got them analyzed so we could do an analysis on them. And there we saw in the soybeans, the same trend was there. We don't show the chisel disc in here, but in the paper it is shown that that is in between, but close to no-till is chisel disc. And then there's the oats. So there again, we saw that, and you will see that the contents in the different crops are also different. So oats are known as being an accumulator of ergothioneine. We are, again, there's so much that we don't know about this. We don't exactly know why. Is that higher in oats than in corn, for example? but the tillage definitely has a big effect on it too.
On your no-till plot, how long was it in no-till? For a number of years or just one
Well, it
season?
was like 40 years.
Oh, okay. Pretty good history.
Each tillage was in there for 40 years.
Wow.
78
You know
is
what?
when it started.
One thing that impresses me about this graph is that it shows that you should eat oatmeal.
Yeah, correct.
Like the effect of oatmeal is far greater than the effect of tillage.
Yes,
Oh, well, that's where the Irish are getting it then.
could be.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
when people,
they call it porridge over there, right?
well, when they refer to corn in Ireland, they're talking about oats.
Oh, really?
Our corn is there. I mean,
Yep. And we also, Bob is also contacted and is working with a farmer who produces a certain kind of a heritage wheat. And it's also high in ergothioneine. So there can also be perhaps differences in the varieties that we grow. This is just a new area of research, so we have a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, what he's referring to there is this, what they call kamut wheat.
yes.
Kamut is the Egyptian word for wheat. That's why they use that name for it. They claim that it's never been genetically modified over years and years and years. And if you look at the kernels are twice the size of normal wheat. This gentleman that I got that I've been doing this with is Bob Quinn. He's a organic wheat farmer in Montana. He farms 4,000 acres of kamut wheat out there, and he also buys from farmers all around there and markets it for them. And he's done. He told me he spent over $2 million doing clinical studies over in Italy at the University of Florence and the University of Bologna, where it shows that people that eat this wheat compared to the regular wheat have a much lower rate of inflammation and rate of inflammatory promoted diseases. So what he claims is that all this genetic manipulation over the years, has caused a lot of compositional changes. And I think the other thing that before I even got involved with him, that bothers me is that all these years, the last 50 years or more, most everything that's been done in agricultural research is to improve the yield. And very little, because I'm a food scientist, so I know very little work is done on what's in the food. And when I was working with mushrooms, I saw this firsthand. They had doubled the yield of mushrooms on the same, square footage of compost and everything. But several of the major components of the mushrooms were reduced by the same percentage. And when I brought this to their attention, they mocked me for even worrying about such a thing. These were growers, these were mushroom growers, because of course they're paid on yield. And that's it.
So this is another aspect of our food system that we have completely focused on production, yield, and we kind of lost track of what is in it, the quality of the food that we produce.
Are you familiar with the work of the Bionutrient Food Association? Dan Kittredge's project in Massachusetts, they're measuring nutrient density on thousands of samples. Well, Cindy is on this call, and Cindy has one of their satellite labs out here in California. And are you gentlemen familiar with them?
No, I'm not. So we do enjoy seeing that.
I think you would appreciate engaging with them because
Yeah.
they're
Well, I don't know.
focusing-
Also, you people might know the Rodale Institute people recently got a grant from the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, which is something funded by USDA to look at nutrient density. and they're looking at amino acids and they're looking at ergothioneine. So as the two, nutrients that they're protein, amino acids, and ergothioneine.
Right
But they're
on.
just getting started. Just getting.
Great. Hey, this is really good stuff, and I appreciate Tom bringing that up. This is Cindy Daly, and I'll just follow up with Jeff to get, connection in terms of your contact information. And it would be awesome if we could maybe get on a call together with Dan and our group to kind of see and compare notes. We're looking at a broader spectrum of antioxidants. So we could probably share some of that information. We're also, because of this group, able to track, differences between till and no-till. And I will tell you, it's been very interesting. And we're still trying to tweeze out the mineral data. So we've got antioxidants, we've got polyphenols. So that's kind of the direction we're going as well. So this is kind of an exciting piece. I really appreciate Jeff bringing this to us. That's
Great.
really
Yeah.
Yeah, well, if you would send us your information so we have your contact information, that would be great.
happy to do that. Great. This is very interesting, fascinating work.
Yeah.
All right.
No,
Anybody else?
I really think that we're onto something important here, and to our health, and that's why, even though I'm going to be 78 in a week, I'm still very interested in keeping it going.
Right. Well, this shift that we're seeing in the soil microbiome is, no doubt related, no doubt, and it can only be brought about, with a change in that, farming practice in this tillage. So I think, I think we've got a lot to talk about, and there's so much that we just don't know. It's kind of scary what we don't know. Yeah.
Well,
Thank you. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. That was exciting.
okay.
All right, Jeff.
All right, last call. Anybody else here? And then we want to thank our guests here. But anybody have a last question? Otherwise, listen. All right. Well, then let me conclude here. Following up on Cindy there, Bob and Sjoerd, we really want to thank you very much. This was last minute pulled together there. It's late in the evening there for you both there, but as Cindy just said, we greatly appreciate this, and we didn't know quite what to expect this afternoon, but we're grateful for your time and for your sharing your knowledge with us. So with that, we'll adjourn here, and we'll stay in contact for sure there. Thanks everyone for the good progress.
Yep. Thank
Thanks,
you,
guys.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks very much, everyone. All right.
All right. Bye.
Thanks. All right. Take care, you guys. All right.